Hi, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I want to talk to you about duplicate stitches. This is an embroidery technique which could allow you to add color work to a knit garment after the fact. Here is an example of a duplicate stitch design that I did onto a stockinette background. And so if you look closely, you can see the original stitches peeking through a bit. But at first glance, you might almost think that I knit this design directly into the fabric. But let me show you the wrong side. And I still have ends I need to weave in. And so the footprint on the back is pretty small because I really just used these yarns to go over the original stitches to create the design versus knitting with them. And I am going to show you how to do this. To do the duplicate stitch, you'll need a tapestry needle, which sometimes people refer to as a yarn needle or a blunt needle, and you'll need yarn in the contrasting color that you will use for the duplicate stitches. Normally I like to use the same weight yarn, but in this case the headband was knit with worsted weight, and I'm using actually sport weight for the duplicate stitches. So even though the yarn I'm doing the duplicate stitches with is lighter, it still works out. Okay, let's start here. Okay, so you're going to start off from the back and insert your needle into the bottom of a stitch and pull the yarn through. And for each stitch that you make, you're going to start at the bottom, go behind the top of the stitch, pull that through, then go back into the bottom where you had started. So what we're doing is we're really following the path that the yarn took for that stitch. And now to do the stitch next door, I'm going to stick my needle into the bottom of the stitch, go up behind the stitch where the yarn goes, and then back down to the base of my stitch. And pull it tight, but not too tight. So we're inserting the needle into the bottom of the stitch, and let's see if I can get a little closer so you can see. To the bottom of the stitch, go around the back following the yarn of the stitch you want to duplicate, and then go back down. And just like with any embroidery or cross stitch that you might do, the order that you do the stitches in, you kind of want to work on the stitch that's the closest to the one you did before. But you know, I'm working on an S right now, and instead of starting here and going back, I went in the other direction. So sometimes there might be floats, and if I'm moving far away, like I did when I did these oxygens, I will sometimes on the reverse kind of weave the yarn through, so that way I don't disrupt the drape of the fabric. But okay, now I'm going to do this stitch right here. So I'm going to insert my yarn, and pull. I don't want to pull too tight because you see I'm going across a few more stitches than I had before. And I'm going to go behind the stitch, the top of the stitch, the yarn around, and back into the bottom of the stitch. And when you're doing duplicate stitches, you don't have to duplicate the entire stitch like I'm doing now. You could do a line and just duplicate half of each of the stitches all the way down. So there are many options with this. I just know I prefer, if I can, to go, if I'm doing a column of complete stitches. So you see you could stop like there if you just wanted the half stitch. But I prefer to go from the top down whenever I can versus the bottom up. Just I think it tends to, the result looks a little better. So there, and now I need to go across again. It's handy to have your design charted out when you are going to be doing, when you're doing this. You can see I did my design here just sketching it out on graph paper, but on the ChemKnits website you can also find a tutorial for creating your own knitting charts using Microsoft Excel, and so that is pretty handy. So we're always inserting the needle at the bottom of a stitch, going around behind the top of the one that we are replicating, and then back down. And you can see the design start to come together. Now we're going down in a line. Usually I prefer to do like some kind of stranded color work versus doing a duplicate stitch, but it's nice sometimes when you only have a couple details in another color to just, it's easier to add it on after the fact than to add another color into your knitting. Or if you make a mistake in your color work and you discover it multiple rows down, you can often fix it by using a duplicate stitch. But never consider embroidery to be my strong suit. I'm much more comfortable with knitting than I am with embroidery. As you see, whoops, I went into the bottom of the wrong stitch. So I'm going to go up one, so that when I'm at the bottom of the stitch I want to duplicate. So yeah, I don't consider myself very good with embroidery, but I don't mind doing duplicate stitches that much. And you can go through and use like your needle to help adjust as you go through, but now I have a nice little S at the beginning of my work. And so since I want to start the next letter up over here, I'll just kind of go through, bring my yarn through the back of some of these duplicate stitches, so that way I don't have a super long float. And I can come out and start working at the bottom of the next stitch that I care about and continue on with my design. I hope that you found this duplicate stitch tutorial helpful. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits.